What is up, everyone? It's your boy Danny GSFG TV here. Now, some trolls and some people might say, "Well, Danny, why are you making a video about something that nobody cares about? Why are you making a non-TTC or sports-related video in general?" Well, I don't really care. Fuck them. I'm gonna talk about what I feel like talking about right now, and that's the crash of Germanwings Flight 9525 a week ago today. Now, for those of you that don't know, the flight was an Airbus A320 from Barcelona to Düsseldorf, and what happened was the plane dropped from 38,000 feet into the French Alps mountains, killing everyone on board. And I'm going to talk about this right now because after the cockpit voice recorder was found, it was ruled to be a pilot suicide, and I'm going to talk about that. Now, the cockpit voice recorder shows that the flight started out completely normal. Everything was normal. Nothing at all seemed out of the ordinary. And at 38,000 feet, while the flight was flying over France on its way from Spain to Germany, the captain, Patrick Honeyhammer, I believe is his name. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but I just saw that that's the captain's name. And the first officer who was accused of intentionally crashing the plane, his name is Andres Lupus. Now, the captain wanted to go to the bathroom, and he told his first officer that he didn't really get a chance to in Barcelona, and he wants to do it real quickly before the descent, because now that shows that the flight was somewhat near when it would be descending to land in Düsseldorf, but not quite, and still at cruising altitude. So what happened was he left to go to the bathroom, and the first officer locked him out basically. And how he was able to do that was on the cockpit door. Since 9/11, there's three different features. There's normal, or I'm sorry, going out of order. There's unlock, which would be the feature that what the cockpit door would be set on while the plane's at the gate would be unlocked, of course, and normal, which would mean locked and indestructible after 9/11. And then we have fully locked, which would be even if somehow, because if it's on normal, someone else can enter the right code and still get in. But if it's unlocked, then that means that even if someone has a code, they can't get in. They have to wait like 5 minutes, I believe. I heard from CNN or something like that, and then the person in the cockpit can reset it, and so they'll have to wait another 5 minutes. So what Andres Lupus set it on was he set it on locked, and after the captain was done using the bathroom, he tried to get back into the cockpit, knocking on the door once. From going by what the cockpit voice recorder data, he knocked on the cockpit door a few times. Normally, got no response, but then once the plane started descending rapidly, he started banging on the cockpit door, and still no response and nothing. And you already know the rest. And passengers' screams could also be heard on the cockpit voice recorder, as well as the first officer's normal breathing, which is a clue which says that it definitely was intentional. He did not somehow have a heart attack and accidentally change the autopilot features or anything. It was completely a deliberate act on the fault of the co-pilot, First Officer Andres Lupus. Now, this is not the first time there's been a pilot suicide. Some famous ones. Back in 1997, the year I was born, Silk Air Flight 185 from Jakarta to Singapore, Boeing 737, was believed to be intentionally crashed by the captain, Captain Su Wei Ming. And what happened then was he first left the cockpit to ask the first officer, Duncan Ward, if he wanted any water, and he did. And once he got back, he he was able to turn off both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. But once he got back into the cockpit after leaving, he told the first officer, Duncan Ward, that the flight attendants needed to see him. Most likely, this isn't proved because, or something like that. So it's not proved exactly what he would have said to him because the cockpit voice recorder on that flight was shut off. The circuit breaker was pulled by him. So that's not clear, but that's well assumed that that's what he did. And so when the first officer, Duncan Ward, leaves the cockpit, Su Wei Ming turns off the flight data recorder, which he wasn't able to do while they were both in the cockpit because it would have caused a massive caution warning, and starts to turn off the autopilot and push the yoke down and make the plane descend rapidly and crash into the water. And it shows on the Mayday air crash investigation episode Duncan Ward, the first officer, banging on the door, knocking on the door, just like what we know to have happened on the Germanwings flight. Now, this isn't proved, but because no one will ever know exactly what happened after the voice recorder was shut down on the Silk Air flight, but this is assumed that that's what happened. A couple years later, in 1999, an Egypt Air Flight 990 from JFK, New York, to en route to Cairo, Egypt. Now, this one actually had more than one crew. Its relief crew, shortly after takeoff from JFK, route over the coast of Massachusetts, wanted to take over early, and they did, and the first officer on that leg was able to be alone in the cockpit at one point when his captain went to go to the bathroom, and he's believed to have, well, and no, it's proved that he did crash the plane according to the cockpit voice recorder because that was on the whole time, and he started saying that he relied on God, and the captain was able to get back into the cockpit because this was before 9/11 and before we had reinforced cockpit doors, and he did, and he tried to fight with his co-pilot for control, but that didn't work. He tried to, because the co-pilot shut off the engines, he tried to restart them. He tried to arm the spoilers, or he did arm the spoilers, the speed brakes, but that didn't stop the rapid descent and didn't stop the crash. And so those are Silk Air 185 and Egypt Air 990 are two of the most famous pilot suicides. There hasn't been quite that many, thankfully, but there has been a few other ones since then. Before and since then. But those two and this one, the Germanwings flight, of course, are the most well known because they had the most fatalities, and they were on major airlines. Silk Air, Egypt Air, Germanwings, which is a parent company of Lufthansa, one of the biggest airlines in the world. All major airlines with very high priced tickets and a lot of passengers and crew. So, now, getting into what I think could have happened to, personally I have no idea why the first officer on the Germanwings flight would crash the plane on purpose, would commit suicide, and therefore kill all his passengers with him. But a lot of theories are he had a severe mental illness, which it was reported that he was treated for suicidal actions or whatever, and he was in danger of maybe losing his eyesight because he had vision problems. He broke up with his girlfriend a year before, which may have caused some problems also. But it's not known. It's still not known at all what exactly could have happened for him to take that Airbus A320 and just crash it into the French Alps. It'll never be known. And he was 27 years old. He was very young for a first officer for a major airline and a major aircraft like the Airbus A320. Now, there's a profile picture of him in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, which, being from the Bay Area, being from San Francisco, or being from Palo Alto, being from outside of San Francisco, that being my favorite city, that's actually was a little bit shocking to see. And it pains me to say this, but he did commit suicide. Now, the Golden Gate Bridge, which he had his profile pic on Facebook taken, that is one of the most popular suicide places to commit suicide in the world, as much as it pains me to say that. So yet he didn't do it then, but yet he would do it on an Airbus A320 with 150 passengers on it. Now that makes me think that he did plan on doing this somehow. He did plan on murdering his passengers and crew, unless somehow he completely just went crazy in that moment. Another thing is, I live in Arizona. He trained here. He trained right in Arizona. He trained in Goodyear at a common aviation school for Lufthansa pilots. And of course, people might be wondering, well, why is a German pilot training here in Arizona? Well, the reason why is because the weather's always good here. And now, what could stop this from happening again, which is a serious problem, because MH370. Now, I personally assume that MH370, which hasn't been found yet after a whole year, was not pilot suicide, but in the Mayday air crash investigation, it was a very big theory, and it was the one that they closed out that episode with. Now, I'm hoping that it wasn't pilot suicide, and I don't think it was, because I'm leaning more towards the other theories. But, you gotta consider everything. And what Lufthansa did since then is they made it where there at least has to be one other person in the cockpit, another crew member, I should say, a flight attendant, which would most likely be. So it would be a flight attendant would have to go into the cockpit with the pilot that's still there, so the pilot can never be alone in the cockpit. Now, in the U.S., I found out that after the Egypt Air flight, my favorite airline, Southwest Airlines in the U.S., even before 9/11, made that their rule to have at least two people in the cockpit at all times. And of course, after the attacks of September 11th, with the reinforced cockpit doors, that was also a requirement for every airline to have two people in the cockpit at all times. And that, along with the reinforced cockpit doors, definitely showed that they had to do with this incident here. And the reinforced cockpit doors, what it did was, instead of keeping a bad guy out, it kept a good guy out. It kept the good captain out when the bad first officer intentionally crashed the plane. So, just tell what you guys think. Tell me, I know that a lot of my subscribers, might not even be watching this, but if you do and you are interested in this topic, tell me what you think. Comment below. I want to know your thoughts. Anyway, that's all I got. DAGSFG TV. I'm out. Peace!